My sister's husband walked in while I was showering. What he did shocked me. I was alone in the shower when I heard the door creak open. The faintest sound, but it was enough to send a shiver down my spine. I froze, soap still clinging to my skin, heart racing. His footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoed through the bathroom. I wanted to scream, to call out, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I stood there, trapped in the silence of the moment, wondering if he could hear the pounding of my heart. And then, just as the water poured over me, he spoke. "I didn't expect you to be here." The words hung in the air, thick with something I couldn't place. The water, hot against my skin, felt like it was burning through me, the steam clouding my thoughts. It wasn't supposed to be like this, not today. Not with everything hanging in the balance. I had told myself that today was just another day, nothing unusual. The house was quiet and peaceful, as it should be. My sister was out running errands, and her husband, Matt, was supposed to be at work. It had been weeks since I'd seen him like this, distant, almost like he was hiding something. I thought I knew him well enough, but in that moment, as I stood there, vulnerable and exposed, I realized how wrong I was. The first time I met Matt, it was like we were strangers crossing paths in a crowded room. He was charming, but there was something about him I couldn't quite place. My sister Emily had been head over heels for him, love-struck from the start. I couldn't understand it. Maybe it was the way he spoke, the way his eyes always seemed to shift away when you caught him staring a little too long. Still, I'd always chalked it up to me being overly cautious. I'd never been one to trust easily, especially when it came to matters of the heart. And yet, Emily was in love. But today was different. It wasn't the first time I had felt this strange unease, this gnawing sense that something wasn't right. The air between Emily and Matt had grown thick in recent months. The late nights at the office, the excuses, the brief moments of tenderness that quickly disappeared into something colder. It wasn't hard to see the cracks forming, but I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to acknowledge what I was starting to feel. The instinct that told me something was wrong, that something was waiting just beneath the surface. Something I wasn't ready for. But here I was, alone, with him. The bathroom door creaked again, and this time I heard his breath, short, uneven. "What are you doing?" I asked, voice trembling. I tried to sound firm, but the words came out weak, hollow. He didn't answer right away. I could almost hear him measuring his words, choosing each one carefully. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, almost too casual, as if nothing was out of place. "Nothing," Matt said. His words were smooth, but they didn't reach his eyes. They were empty and cold. I turned my back to him, hoping he'd leave. Hoping this moment, this terrifying, impossible moment, was nothing more than a bad dream. But the warmth of the shower felt like it was fading, the heat slipping away as quickly as my composure. I hadn't planned for any of this. I hadn't planned for the lingering glances, the unexpected touches, the secrets that felt like they were creeping into every conversation, every moment of silence. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. But it was happening now, and there was no way to take it back. Suddenly, I felt him behind me, too close. I could feel the weight of his presence, his breath against my skin. I wanted to move, to escape, but the fear held me in place. I wasn't sure what he was thinking or what he wanted. All I knew was that something had shifted, something irreversible. Then, without warning, he reached forward, brushing a strand of wet hair away from my shoulder. It was a simple gesture, but it felt heavy, like a betrayal waiting to happen. I flinched, but he didn't seem to notice or care. "I didn't mean to intrude," Matt murmured, his voice softer now, almost like he was apologizing for something. But I wasn't sure what he was apologizing for. I wasn't sure if he even realized what was happening. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Was this just another moment where I had misread things? Or was this the beginning of something far worse than I could have ever imagined? I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. All I could do was stand there, frozen, waiting for the storm to break. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I should have known. The little things, the way Matt never stayed late at work anymore, the way Emily seemed so distant, always too busy for the simple moments we once shared, should have been enough to make me wonder. But I ignored it. I chose to see everything through rose-colored glasses, telling myself it was just a rough patch. It wasn't. And now, standing here in this moment, I could feel it, thick as the steam swirling around me, the truth that I had been avoiding for far too long. I had always admired Emily's life. On the surface, everything was perfect. She had the kind of life people envied, a beautiful home, a loving husband, and 2 children who were her world. From the outside, it seemed like nothing could go wrong. People would look at Emily and Matt, and they'd smile. They'd say things like, "What a wonderful couple," or "You two are goals." Emily had the family everyone wished for. And Matt, he was the golden boy. Kind, respectful, always smiling. Everyone saw the man they wanted him to be, the man I had hoped him to be. But the cracks, they were there. I saw them first. Maybe it was because I was closer to Emily than anyone else. Maybe it was because I had been living in their world too long to miss the subtle shifts, the moments when Matt's smile didn't reach his eyes, the times he left the house with no explanation, no goodbye, and I'd just tell myself it was work. Work, after all, was the one thing that always seemed to be his excuse. "He's probably just tired," Emily would say when I asked about him. "You know how it is. Work is stressful." But I wasn't convinced. No, there was more to it than that. And when he started staying out later, more often, I couldn't ignore it any longer. But Emily, she couldn't see it. She didn't see the changes, or if she did, she never let on. Instead, she would brush it off, convinced that everything was fine. Everything was fine, wasn't it? The house was clean, the kids were healthy, and Matt, well, he still kissed her goodnight every night. He was still there, wasn't he? Yet I knew. I could feel it. That unspoken distance grew between them, like a wall that was slowly being built, brick by brick. The affection they once shared was fading, replaced by awkward silences, and I couldn't help but wonder if Emily was simply blind to it all. The first time I noticed something was wrong was a few months ago, when I overheard a conversation between Emily and Matt. It wasn't intentional. I didn't mean to listen in, but I heard it. I was in the hallway coming back from the kitchen when I noticed their voices, raised in frustration, coming from their bedroom. I stood there for a moment, unsure if I should step in, unsure if I should interrupt. "I don't think I can do this anymore, Matt." Emily's voice was raw, thick with emotion. Matt's response was almost a whisper, as though he was afraid of saying too much. "You don't understand, Em. You don't get it." "But I do," Emily snapped, and I could feel the anger in her words. "I see you slipping away from me, and it kills me." There was silence, then a heavy sigh. "I'm right here," Matt finally said, his voice soft and regretful. But that wasn't the truth. Not really. And as I listened to their muffled voices, I felt something inside me break. Because I realized that he was already gone. Somewhere along the way, Matt had stopped being the man he was. And no matter how much Emily tried to fix it, it was already too late. I knew it then, but I said nothing. Days turned into weeks, and Emily's frustration grew. She tried to fill the gap with more activities, with more time spent with the kids, but it never seemed enough. And Matt? Well, he stayed distant, always busy, always with something else on his mind. Sometimes I caught him looking at his phone, his face tense, his fingers typing away. But when I asked, he'd just brush it off. "Just work stuff," he'd say, as if that was enough to satisfy my curiosity. I didn't ask again. I didn't want to know. but I could feel the tension between us. Every time I saw him, I felt it. The wall he was building between us, between all of us. And the worst part? Emily was still blind to it. She thought he was just tired, just stressed, but I knew better. I could see the lies, the half-truths, the cracks in his armor. And then there were the moments when we were alone. It wasn't often, but now and then I'd find myself alone with Matt, in the quiet of the house. Emily would be out, the kids would be in bed, and it would just be the two of us. In those moments, I couldn't help but notice how he looked at me. It wasn't the same way he looked at Emily, but it was different. It was strange. Sometimes I caught him watching me from the corner of his eye, his gaze lingering just a little too long. At first I thought I was imagining it, but I wasn't. The tension was there, thick and palpable. It was in the way his hand brushed against mine when he passed me in the hallway. In the way he smiled a little too softly when our eyes met, and each time I could feel the weight of it, pulling me in. I hated myself for noticing it, but I couldn't ignore it. It was like something inside of him had shifted, and I didn't know if it was a weakness, an attraction, or something darker. But I told myself nothing was happening. Nothing could happen. After all, Matt was married, he had a family, and I was his wife's sister. The line was clear, the boundaries were set, there was no crossing them. But with every passing day, I found myself closer to the edge, wondering just how far things had gone and how much longer it would take before everything came crashing down. The evening of the barbecue was when everything changed. It was supposed to be a simple family gathering, nothing special. Emily had planned it weeks ago, a chance for all of us to unwind, enjoy some good food, and laugh. But there was something in the air that night. An unspoken tension, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. The heat from the grill seemed to make the air heavier, the laughter around the table more forced. And Matt? He seemed even more distant than usual. I caught him sneaking glances at me when he thought no one was looking, his eyes lingering just a little too long, as if he was waiting for something. I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on Emily, on the kids, but I couldn't. My mind kept drifting back to those moments we'd shared in the silence of the house. The moments when I'd caught him looking at me, when I'd felt his presence just a little too close, just a little too heavy. That night, as I stood by the grill, flipping burgers, I could feel his eyes on me again. His gaze was intense, almost hungry, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to break. I felt the air between us shift, felt the ground beneath my feet falter. The night ended quietly, but the damage had already been done, and I knew, deep down, that things would never be the same again. It started small, just a shift in the air, an imperceptible pull between us. I didn't want to acknowledge it. I couldn't. But every time I saw Matt, every time our eyes met, it was as though the world around us faded just a little, leaving only that unspoken connection between us. It wasn't supposed to happen, but it was, and the worst part was I couldn't stop it. I didn't even want to. It was a late afternoon when it first happened. The kids were with Emily's parents for the weekend, and she had gone out to run errands, leaving Matt and me alone. I was sitting in the living room, flicking through a magazine, trying to ignore the heavy silence that sat between us. I couldn't help but notice how close he was, how his presence seemed to fill the room. He was sitting across from me, but the distance between us felt smaller, almost non-existent. "How have you been?" he asked, his voice softer than usual, almost like he was trying to be gentle, trying to break through the walls that had been growing between us. I looked up, startled by the question. "Fine, I guess," I replied, my words coming out too quickly. The truth was, I hadn't been fine. I hadn't felt fine in a long time, not with everything I had been sensing between us. He nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on mine. "You seem different, not like you used to be." I froze. There it was again, that shift. His words were innocent enough, but they carried something more. a hint of curiosity, a subtle invitation, as if he were searching for something in me, trying to understand something he couldn't quite put into words. The heat of his gaze made me uncomfortable, but I didn't look away. "Maybe I've just been thinking too much," I said, forcing a smile, trying to brush it off. But the smile didn't reach my eyes, and he saw right through it. His lips curled into a small, knowing smile as he leaned forward, the distance between us growing shorter still. "Sometimes it helps to talk about it," he said, his voice almost a whisper. And there it was, that quiet, dangerous temptation. The opening, the door that I should never have walked through. But I was already too far in, too deep. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Instead, I closed my magazine and set it aside, my hands shaking slightly as I folded them in my lap. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run, but I didn't move. I couldn't. His presence was magnetic, pulling me in, and I was powerless to resist. It wasn't just the conversations that made things worse. It was the touch. The accidental brush of his hand against mine when we both reached for the same thing in the kitchen. The way he lingered a moment too long, his fingers brushing mine in a way that sent a jolt through my body. I told myself it was nothing, that it meant nothing, but deep down I knew the truth. Each touch felt like an invitation, a subtle push closer to the edge. I couldn't explain it. It wasn't that I wanted this. I didn't. But with every glance, every brush of his hand, the lines between us blurred. The tension thickened until it felt like the air itself was charged, crackling with unspoken words. Then there was that night. The night everything shifted. It was after dinner and Emily had gone out again. She was always so busy lately. And Matt. He was quiet and distant as usual, but this time he didn't leave. He stayed. I wasn't sure why, but something told me he wanted to be there, wanted to stay in the same space as me, even if neither of us knew how to say it. We were sitting on the couch watching some random show on TV, but neither of us was paying attention. I could feel the weight of his gaze on me, could feel the way he seemed to be studying me. My heart pounded in my chest, and my hands, which were folded neatly in my lap, began to tremble slightly. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low, almost too soft. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The words were stuck in my throat, tangled with emotions I didn't know how to handle. What was this? What was he doing? And more importantly, why was I letting it happen? Matt leaned closer. Too close. I could feel the heat radiating off him, smell the familiar scent of his cologne mixing with the stale air of the room. His breath was warm against my skin as he spoke again, voice barely above a whisper. "You've been so distant lately. I miss you." And there it was, the confession, the crack that broke the dam wide open. I wanted to pull away. I wanted to tell him no, to remind him of the lines we couldn't cross, the walls we'd both agreed to keep up. But instead, I found myself frozen in place. His words hung in the air like a weight, and the silence that followed was thick, suffocating. He was too close. I could feel his body heat, could feel the tension between us growing with every passing second. My pulse raced in my ears, and my breath was shallow. And then, without thinking, I looked at him. For the first time in a long time, I saw the man sitting beside me, the man I had known for so long, but in a different way. His eyes were dark, intense, full of something I couldn't understand, something dangerous. "Matt," I whispered, but my voice betrayed me. It was soft, hesitant. It was an invitation, though I wasn't sure I wanted it to be. He didn't say anything. Instead, he just looked at me, as though waiting for me to make the next move. And in that moment, I could feel it. The pull, the undeniable attraction. It was overwhelming and suffocating, and I couldn't look away. It was then that I realized I had crossed a line. The moment I looked at him the way I did, everything had changed. There was no going back from this, no erasing the connection that had formed between us. It was dangerous, but I couldn't stop it. And neither could he. We sat in silence for what felt like an eternity, the world outside fading into nothingness. The only thing that existed was the space between us, heavy and fraught with everything we hadn't said, but both knew was there. I should have gotten up. I should have walked away and told him to leave. But I didn't. Instead, I stayed there in that moment, locked in the tension of everything unspoken, everything forbidden. And I knew, without a doubt, that what was coming next would change everything. There was no way out now. And I wasn't sure I even wanted one. The night was quiet, almost eerily so. The kind of quiet that presses against your chest, making it hard to breathe. Emily had gone out again, another late-night errand, a time when she always seemed to disappear for just a little too long. The kids were asleep. The house felt hollow, like a shell, like something that was no longer complete. And in that silence, I felt him again. Matthew. His presence was like a weight pressing against the walls of my mind, closing in on me. We were in the living room, the dim light from the lamp casting long shadows across the room. I couldn't bring myself to look at him, not after everything that had happened, not after everything that had been building up between us. And yet there he was, sitting across from me, the air between us thick with unspoken words. His voice broke the silence. I can't keep pretending, you know. His tone was low, almost fragile. There was something in it, something I hadn't heard before. Vulnerability, something raw and desperate. I can't keep acting like nothing's wrong when everything is. I didn't know how to respond. I should have told him to stop. I should have told him to leave, to get out of my life, to never come near me again. But instead, I just sat there, frozen, my heart racing in my chest. You're not the only one who feels this way, he continued, his eyes dark and intense, his gaze locked on mine. I can't keep pretending that I'm not drawn to you, that I don't need you, want you. His words hit me like a wave, crashing over everything I had tried to keep buried. I wanted to pull away, to scream, to tell him to stop, but the words wouldn't come. The truth, the forbidden truth, hung between us, and for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted it to disappear. I wanted to feel something. Anything at this point. Matt stood up slowly, as if he were waiting for me to stop him, to push him away. But I didn't. And as he moved closer, I felt my breath catch in my throat. I could smell the faint scent of his cologne, feel the heat of his body as he closed the distance between us. His hand reached for mine, tentative, almost unsure. But when our fingers brushed, the electricity between us was undeniable, like a spark that ignited everything in its path. Tell me to stop, he whispered, his voice trembling now. Tell me to walk away, and I will, but I can't. I can't keep pretending I don't want this. His hand hovered above mine for a moment before he gently gripped it, his touch sending a jolt of warmth through my body. And in that moment, everything inside me screamed that this was wrong, that this was a line I should never cross. But the need, the desire, the temptation was so strong, and I could feel myself slipping, losing control of the very thing I had once vowed to protect. I looked up at him, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath shallow. His eyes were full of something I couldn't name, something dangerous. He wasn't just looking at me anymore. He was seeing me in a way no one had ever seen me before. And that look, it shook me to my core. I should have stopped it. I should have pulled away, told him no, and told him to go back to his wife. But instead, I whispered the words I never thought I'd say. I can't. I don't want you to leave. And that was all it took. Matt's lips were on mine in an instant. There was no hesitation now, no second guessing. Just the overwhelming rush of emotions that had built up between us, spilling over. His kiss was desperate, filled with something raw and untamed, and it consumed me. I let it happen. I let him pull me into his embrace, let him kiss me as though he was starving for it, as though this was the only thing that mattered in the world. The taste of him was intoxicating, and I found myself responding in ways I hadn't expected. I shouldn't have been doing this. I knew it. But in that moment, it felt like everything else faded away. The world, the consequences, the reality of what was happening, none of it mattered. It was just the two of us, and nothing else existed. But then, just as quickly as it had begun, everything stopped. Matt pulled away, his breath ragged, his chest rising and falling with the effort. His eyes searched mine, filled with something I couldn't read. Regret, fear, desire, all tangled up together. "God, what have we done?" he murmured, his voice shaking. I sat there, stunned, unable to speak. The reality of what had just happened began to sink in, and it was like a bucket of ice-cold water had been poured over me. The truth hit me harder than anything else ever could. What had we done? What had I done? In that moment, the walls of my carefully built world came crashing down. I had betrayed her. I had betrayed Emily, the sister I loved, the one I swore to protect. And it was too late. There was no undoing it. Matt stood up abruptly, backing away as if he too were trying to escape what had just happened. His face was pale, his expression torn between guilt and something else, something darker. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the words barely audible, but it was too late. The damage was done. And as I sat there trying to piece together the fragments of my shattered thoughts, I realized that this wasn't just a mistake. This was a moment that would haunt me forever, a moment that would change everything, and the worst part? I couldn't even bring myself to regret it. Not yet. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that made the air feel thick, suffocating. I had barely moved since Matt had left, my body numb, my mind racing, replaying every moment, every second. What had we done? Why had I let it happen? And then I heard the front door slam. My heart stopped. It was Emily. She was home. I tried to steady my breath, to calm the storm inside me, but it was no use. There was no hiding the truth anymore, no pretending, no turning back. I heard her footsteps, quick, hurried. She was moving fast, almost frantic, and then the door to the living room opened. Her eyes met mine, wide, filled with confusion. And then, as if something inside her had snapped, her gaze dropped to the floor. There, on the coffee table, was a bottle of wine, one we hadn't opened in weeks. She saw it, and then she saw us. Her eyes darted between Matt and me, and in that moment, the world seemed to stop. Time slowed down, stretching out unbearably. I could feel the panic rising in my chest, could feel the sweat gathering at the back of my neck. But Emily... She didn't speak, not at first. Her face was pale, her lips trembling. Then, without warning, her voice broke, soft and jagged. What is this?" Matt's eyes were wide, regret flashing in his expression, but it was too late for apologies. I could feel the weight of the moment crashing down on me, suffocating me. "I'm sorry, Emily," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant for this to happen." But she wasn't listening. She took a step forward, her face turning red with anger, confusion, betrayal. "You never meant for this?" She spat, the words cutting through the air like a knife. "You think I don't see it? I see it in your eyes, both of you." I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. What could I say? What could I possibly say to make this right? There was no fixing this. Not now. "I don't know what to say," Matt murmured, his voice broken. "I'm so sorry." But Emily shook her head violently, her eyes filling with tears. "Sorry? Is that all you can say?" She looked at me then, her expression unreadable. You've crossed a line, both of you. And in that moment, I realized there was no going back. Nothing would ever be the same again. Days passed in a blur of silence. The house felt emptier than ever. Emily left. I don't know where she went, but I never saw her again. The kids? They were with her parents, and I couldn't bear to face them. Matt? He was gone too, though his absence felt louder, heavier. I kept waiting for the world to make sense again, for the guilt, the regret to fade, but it didn't. It only grew. I sat alone in the living room, staring at the wedding photo of Emily and Matt on the mantel. The once joyful faces seemed like strangers now. I wanted to scream, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness, but I knew it was too late. Nothing would fix this. The damage was done, and there was no way to undo it. I lost everything: my sister, my respect for myself, the life I thought I had. In a single moment, everything changed, and I was left to pick up the broken pieces of my actions. As I sit here now, I'm haunted by the past, but I still can't undo it. If you've ever found yourself on the edge of something you can't return from, please, learn from this. Leave a comment, share your thoughts, and if you're still here, like and subscribe. Maybe together, we can learn how to avoid the things that break us.